Welcome in, Slump Busters. Thank you for joining us. Your hosts, Juju and Kyle. Stay locked on for this segment as we welcome for the second time Dieter Kurtenbach of KNBR and host of Locked on Warriors. Dieter, it's been a month, but it feels like years. How are you following a couple of heart-pounding games in Memphis?
Well, I won't lie. I'm pretty angry after game two. I think that the NBA has a real issue on its hands with this Dillon Brooks situation. If they don't come down pretty heavy, they're opening up a Pandora's box. As Steve Kerr said, there's a line. I agree with Steve Kerr. That play well crossed it. And I know that folks aren't supposed to litigate the result, but well, that's what we do in everyday life too. And Gary Payton breaks his elbow, hurts the Warriors' title chances moving forward, hurts their chances in this series. And if Dillon Brooks gets to play again in this series, which I expect him to, I don't like it, but I expect him to. It doesn't feel like there's much karmic balance in the universe with that. So there's a little bit of anger. I'd prefer to be talking about sort of the X's and O's and all the interesting things happening with spacing and Ja Morant and Klay Thompson and Jordan Poole. But the predominant emotion, it seems out there, the emotion that I carry too is frustration, anger, and it's anything but basketball. And when the playoffs have been so exceptional across the board, I mean, well beyond the Warriors series, that's a damn shame. So I hope the NBA can do something to get this train back on track. The ball is in their court now, but sorry to say I don't have a terrible amount of trust in them to make that happen.
Well, you mentioned that incident, and then obviously game one had the Draymond ejection. We've seen things have been a little bit heated, and I imagine that season-ending injury will only add to the frustrations on both sides here. So, not to pin the success or failures on the referees, but how should they approach the rest of the series? Because I imagine that it's going to be pretty contentious on both sides.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see how that goes, because obviously the whistle has been a foundational part of this series to date, as you noted. And I can make the argument that the Warriors kind of want it both ways, right? That when they're on offense, they're getting bashed around. Steph Curry and Jordan Poole have spent more time on the floor than they have at the free throw line. Okay, so that's a standard that the Warriors would not like to see maintained when they come to San Francisco. But defensively, they're so small, the Warriors are, that they need a little bit more room to bump. So they're just looking for that home court whistle that Memphis got. And if there's one thing that we know about the NBA playoffs, it's that in the first 4 games, you can guarantee a home court whistle. That's just how it goes. So the Warriors are hoping that it evens out the way that it usually does. I won't lie, though. I don't expect this to get much chippier. I mean, I don't expect it to get any more physical. If the Warriors were going to start something, they would have done something last night. And there's a legitimate disappointment that the Warriors, and I guess maybe you could pass this off as class or experience or whatever, but like Gary Payton II got taken out. That was a hit and nothing happened. Warriors didn't do a thing. And I don't know what that says. I'm certainly not one for bloodlust. It doesn't look good on anybody, but the fact that there wasn't even like a scrum, right, or some sort of coming together and bashing of the heads in that moment, the fact that it just didn't feel like, I don't feel like the Warriors really stood up for their guy in that moment. Maybe it was just the shock of the audacity to do what Dillon Brooks did. But I have to wonder if a dirty guy like Zaza Pachulia was around, David West, who was a very clean player, but certainly an enforcer. If somebody like that was around, even JaVale McGee would, kind of stand up for his guys. If the Warriors roster was in a situation where they just had like a true big man who could stand up and tower over somebody, I wonder if that would have been different. And I wonder if that would have changed the tenor of the contest, because the Grizzlies, after that, what was their incentive to stop playing dirty? I didn't see one. I mean, Draymond got elbowed in the face mere moments later. The rest of the game, they were pushed and battered around. And the fact of the matter is that I don't think the Grizzlies, as currently constructed, and certainly with Desmond Bane's back injury, I don't think they can beat the Warriors straight up. So they have to drag them down. They got to bring them into the muck. And the first 2 games, there was no encumberment to mucking that game up. We'll see if that changes. I think it will change in games 3 or 4. But the Warriors have to do a better job of getting down in that muck. They know what the series is about. They know what Memphis is trying to do. They're, 1, allowing them to do it with the help of the referees, no doubt. And 2, I don't think that they're doing a very good job inside that environment. Very curious to see moving forward. But in terms of fireworks or anything like that, last night was the game for it. It didn't happen. I do think the crowd will get their say, no doubt. But Yeah, a little bit disappointing in that regard.
You know, what's interesting, and I wanted to throw this by you a bit, because after Draymond got ejected in game one, and then it kind of carried over to game two, I started to think about how after Draymond's suspension in the 2016 finals,
right,
and it may or may not have cost them a championship. You know, we'll debate
league?
that for the rest of the
time. Where you're going?
It felt like league. Sort of. I mean, it just felt like the demeanor of the Warriors changed. And part of that, I think we assumed, was Kevin Durant joining the team, and they didn't need any of the stuff that they had before because they weren't the chippy underdogs or the fun story in that way. I just kind of associated it as like the team demeanor kind of changed once it may or may not have cost them a championship, all the antics that may have been going on around the team. And so now they kind of look at it as just be the bigger person.
I think that there's a lot of credence to that. I do think that there's a lot of, I would actually agree with you 100% that they want to be the bigger man in that. And that, as I said, you can chalk it up as, oh, it's experienced. Forgive me here, but fuck experience sometimes, man. Like sometimes you got to stand up for your dudes. Sometimes you got to go out there and put a chest in somebody. That was not a basketball game. That was mixed martial arts. Where was the Taekwondo from the Golden State Warriors? I mean, just, oh, we'll play through it. Zen doesn't get the job done in a situation like that. That is an alleyway brawl, and there's a knife in the middle of the floor. Grab the knife. And again, this is not a good look for me. I'm sure in months this will look ridiculous. There's bloodlust. I'm sure it's coming out of my eyes here. And it's a bad look, as I said, on anybody. But when you cross the line, who is going to regulate that? I mean, the referees kicked him out of the game, but did that really teach Memphis a lesson? I mean, legitimately, the only thing that regulated that game was the sheer gall of Dillon Brooks. I mean, you hear in the crowd when they show the instant replay of that action, you even hear the crowd go, ooh. Like, it wasn't to Gary Payton's elbow. It was because it's like, that's indefensible. Now, the Draymond situation in game one, let me be very clear, and I've said this a dozen times since it happened, that was a flagrant 2. Is it a borderline flagrant 2? Absolutely. I think that if the Warriors were at home and that was Andrew Wiggins, it's a flagrant 1 and we all move on. But it's on the road and it's Draymond Green. Benefit of the doubt is lost in 2 different spots there. Sorry, Draymond. He did 2 flagrant fouls on the same play. 1, he grabbed Brandon Clark's jersey. I don't care what the intent is. He grabbed Brandon Clark's jersey. That's a flagrant 1. There's no room for misinterpretation on that. The other thing is he punched Brandon Clark in the face. Like, I know that, oh, he was just going for the ball. Well, he missed. I don't care what the intent is. That's a flagrant 2. That's a flagrant 2 with 2 positive intents that came out poorly. Okay, fair enough. You can still get kicked out of a game for that. I don't care what your intent was. The issue with Brooks is that's a flagrant 2 where you cannot reasonably tell me that he didn't have intent to seriously hurt or injure, that wasn't a Bush League patty ass play where Brooks barely jumped. If he was going for the ball, he's less coordinated than me, and that says something. You cannot tell me, oh, he didn't mean to do that. What evidence is there? We're just taking his word for it. He doesn't have that kind of say. He doesn't have that kind of reputation as, oh, what a clean player. He's a rock chucker, has been since day one. And that's a great thing about him. He's a brilliant basketball player in the regular season, but he took it way too far, way too fast. So I can appreciate the Warriors wanting to be the bigger team, but how about this? How about they're the actual bigger? It would be something if they were the actual physically larger team in that situation where they could just lord over somebody and say, that's that now, young man. I mean, the Grizzlies are young and they're brash and they have gone way past the line of acceptable behavior. And the Golden State Warriors, experienced and, KG and all that stuff. And yet they're not the ones reining them in. That tells me something. And I'm very curious to see how this plays out because I want to be very blunt about this. The Warriors are screwed. They're screwed. I think that they'll beat Memphis, but Memphis is going to keep taking pounds of flesh. They are going to keep pushing the limits. If the Warriors escape from this series, they will not be better for it. They will not just come out and have a spring in their step. Denver was, it was a little tough, but let's go out there. We get a couple of days off. No, they will come out of this bruised, battered, and worse for wear. And if Phoenix continues to take care, and we'll see. I mean, I do have some faith in Luka Doncic here because he's a brilliant basketball player, but he's just one guy. You're counting on Jalen Brunson and Spencer Dinwiddie and Maxi Kleber to do some serious work against the team that was unquestionably the best in the NBA this regular season. If the Suns just mosey on through to the Western Conference Finals, and the Warriors limp in with no Gary Payton, who, by the way, vital against both Devin Booker and Chris Paul, the Warriors are screwed. I don't see how after last night, the Warriors can still get back into that title contender status because they lost a key player, arguably their only good perimeter defender outside of Andrew Wiggins, who is in and out, and he's done a really wonderful job this postseason, but I don't know if that's the guy you want to be riding with in crunch time minutes on the perimeter. One guy, by the way, foul trouble, NBA playoffs. Like, is that a good thing? You just lost your number one perimeter defender, a vital aspect of any championship team, and you're not showing the sort of size in both ego and physicality that will stop Memphis from continuing to do stuff like this. Not as egregious, of course. I would like to think that Memphis wouldn't try something like that again. But again, just the little thing where, Steph is always on his ass. Poole is always on his ass. Draymond's getting elbowed in the face. All this stuff. And I know the Warriors are dishing it out a little bit too. Again, Draymond's flagrant one. I'm not saying that they're a clean team and that, they have been besmirched and sullied by the Memphis Grizzlies. Whoever wins this series is winning a war of attrition. And the Warriors cannot have any more attrition than they've already gotten. They can't beat the Phoenix Suns less than their current state. And their current state, I still would pick the Suns. So I think they're screwed after this. I think that this is one of those things where in the moment, obviously it's big because of the situation. But I think that this is one of those things that we'll look back and go, oh man. Yeah, of course they didn't, because they didn't have Gary Payton and because Steph was banged up and because Klay got a knee knock and all this stuff. And we'll just have a bunch of excuses. And I don't know if it had to be like this way, but certainly it was predictable. Steve Kerr's coming out before game 2. It's like, this is going to be the most physical game ever. And of course it went beyond that, but yeah, just absolutely brutal. And a team that had a little bit more depth, a team that was better built for this would be able to withstand it. The Golden State Warriors are straight up not that team.
Dieter, a lot of good stuff in there. And I want to thank you for adding Bush League back into my vocabulary. I haven't heard that term in a while, but glad to add it back into my repertoire. But, there are some things to take away that I think are bright spots. I mean, Klay and Steph went 16 for 44. It took a 47-point effort from Ja Morant. You guys still split the first 2 games in Memphis. There's a lot of good things to take away from there. They only beat you guys by 5 last night. With all that, with a terrible shooting night from 2 Hall of Famers and Ja absolutely going nuts, going ham. Yeah. With that said, what was the time in Memphis overall a net win, even with the injuries?
No, because of the injury. If they were to have split on less acrimonious circumstances, I think we could spin it that way. But no. It goes beyond that. It goes beyond just the basic no. There's something critically wrong with this Warriors team, or at least the matchup with Memphis. Memphis has just given this team problems for very obvious reasons. They are just big and physical, and they want to pound you into submission. And they are really good at controlling the pace of the game. My God, what happens when Ja Morant actually figures out that if he slows down, he'll be a really good point guard? Right now, he's just going at 500 miles per hour. Doesn't know where the brakes are, doesn't know how to go into second gear. It's just 6th gear all the time, and he's still dropping 47. If he ever figures out even a 100th of what Chris Paul can do in terms of, controlling the pace of the game, actually operating, it's game over, because that Memphis team is physically built to be really impressive in the playoffs. They can't shoot worth a lick, but they will make sure that they get a lick in or 2 on you. And I just don't think the Warriors are better off, because this always looked like it was going to be a 6 or 7. And there's a reason that Gary Payton II was starting. It was, 1, the fact that the Warriors didn't have a tremendous amount of depth, but 2, it's, Klay Thompson isn't the kind of defender he once was. You can't put him on Ja. You're dead. You put him on Ja, you're dead. And that's a huge issue. Klay has shot 31%, 21% from beyond the arc over the last 3 games. At what point is that a larger commentary on Klay and not so much just, he had a bad game in game 2. I mean, there's issues there. They're not able to score at the rim at the rate that they would need to be able to score at the rim, the Warriors, because of Brandon Clark and even Xavier Tillman and certainly Jaren Jackson Jr. Memphis is built to beat Golden State. The reason that they are tied 1-1 is because Memphis has no idea what it's doing. Like that's the cut and dry. They have no idea how to play playoff basketball. The issue is they're figuring it out every day. They're getting a little bit smarter every day. Well, I say for game 2. because heaven forbid, we ever align smartness with the Memphis Grizzlies for their game 2 performance. The Warriors are getting a little weaker every day. If Klay doesn't bounce back, if we don't see a Klay game soon, I'm talking in San Francisco, next 2 games, there's a larger comment to be made. They can't win. They can't win unless Klay Thompson wants to be a 20-point per game scorer. Jordan Poole has been wonderful. You cannot expect Jordan Poole against this level of physicality to be dropping 30 every night. That's just not fair. Steph Curry is going to do incredible Steph Curry things. If he is even slightly off, the Warriors are cooked. Defensively, Memphis is now figured out with Ja. And I don't know if it's necessarily that big of a problem because, again, they're such a bad shooting team. But they have figured out with Ja that he can get whatever he wants off the dribble, whatever he wants. They pushed more and more from game 1 where Ja was settling for those 3-pointers to then more and more, I'll just take this space as runway to go do what it is I need to do. And either, a crazy circus shot going to the line or the drive and dish. And Memphis is a smart enough team to dish it a couple more times beyond that. And eventually rotations break down. Again, I do think the Warriors win this because they lost by 5 last night with an emotional letdown, with Klay Thompson playing like crap, with Steph Curry not playing all that well. I don't know, outside of Andrew Wiggins, who didn't, you look at the box score and you wouldn't know, outside of Andrew Wiggins, who played well? Looney, and yet they only, and as you noted, Ja went for 47, and yet they only lost by 5. But I don't think Memphis is going to shoot that poorly again. And I don't know if the Warriors are going to be able to ramp it up anymore. Because, again, Klay Thompson has been more hindrance than benefit for the last 3 games. And so long as that's the case, the Warriors are equal, maybe even a little bit worse than Memphis. And that's giving Jordan Poole the benefit of the doubt that he's going to play well every night, which we saw in the Denver series isn't necessarily something we can give him. Again, even if the Warriors win this one, you think about the toll that this series would take. And maybe this is just over reverence for the Phoenix Suns, who, again, they had their struggles in the first round. It's not as if they're infallible, but Phoenix has the 3 things that you need to win. They have an operator, somebody who can control the pace of the game at the point guard position, somebody who understands situational basketball and make sure that his team's always in the right set to combat the defense that they're seeing. Coach on the floor on the offensive side. The Warriors have that too in Draymond Green, and I would argue Stephen Curry to a degree, and maybe even Jordan Poole if we get down the line a little bit more. But there's no one better at that than Chris Paul. Chris Paul can control a game entirely by scoring 5 points. The only other guy that you can say that about in the playoffs right now is Draymond Green. So you have an operator. You need a perimeter defender, the lockdown guy. I would venture to say that Mikal Bridges qualifies. Does Andrew Wiggins? Because with Andrew Wiggins and Gary Payton II, I can amalgamate one of them. I can feel pretty good about my odds. We'll throw him at that one. We'll throw him at that guy. You can mix and match. No Andre Iguodala, and Andre Iguodala, that was never that dude anyway, makes it a real issue. So now you're just relying on Wiggins. I've loved what I've seen from Wiggins this postseason. That is a tall order when you only get 6 fouls per game and you're going up against a point guard like Ja Morant. So you got that. So Phoenix is now up 1, if not up 2. And, the third thing is somebody who can get to their spot on the floor and just knock down a bucket in the mid-range anytime they want. It doesn't matter what you do defensively unless you're putting 2 guys on them, they're getting points. And the Warriors don't have that dude. Curry and Poole get close, and maybe I'll give Poole more of the benefit of the doubt on that one. But Curry has also been really good in the mid-range. But both Paul and Booker do that for the Suns. Paul does it as well as anybody you've ever seen at that size. And Booker's a bucket. There's just no 2 ways about it.
Yeah. The Warriors' defense is their strength. How do you feel about the performance they've had so far in the series?
It's been fine. I'm cautious to present this as like a knee-jerk thing. I don't think we were giving the proper amount of respect to Gary Payton II for his performance in game 1, because clearly Memphis, with their adjustments, they did some really nice things. They also just knocked down a lot of big shots in both of those games. But clearly something shifted in game 2 with Morant. And if Payton was there, you at least have to have some skepticism. Not to say it wouldn't have happened, but there's some skepticism that it would have happened. So what I found really interesting in game 1, and I want to give some credit to Steve Kerr on this, was that they played better when Draymond Green got kicked out of game 1. And it wasn't just the wake-up call that they alluded to. Clearly, some of that is, hey, no Draymond, maybe we need to up our game a little bit. But they offensively were running the offense through Steph Curry and Jordan Poole. So it's a little bit more of kind of the classic perimeter pick and roll offense. A little less motion, a little less split action, a little less horns, a little bit more just high pick and roll. 5 out. We're going to space you and we're going to cook you on the perimeter. And defensively, it was just a straightforward defense. 5 up, switch everything, guard like hell. And when Draymond's in there, it's beautiful if it goes right, because Draymond's freelancing. He's that second guy who comes in. He's allowed to do whatever he wants. But I think Memphis is deft enough as a passing team. They are a really underrated passing team, as we've seen in these first 2 games. They're deft enough to exploit that. And I thought in game 2, the Warriors did a nice job of staying honest on the defensive side more often than not. They didn't have to resort to janky zones or anything. Every playoff series is defined by who they let shoot for you. Draymond Green has clearly been one of those guys for, every game he's ever played in the postseason. In this series, it's, any Memphis Grizzly whatsoever. You're going to have to leave something because the players are too good to not leave somebody. And I just thought that schematically they were in a really good spot. I thought that they were in a really nice spot. I think those adjustments that Kerr made from game 1 to game 2, the lessons that he learned from Draymond not being in, were correctly appropriated with Draymond in the game. It doesn't mean it was good, though. It doesn't mean that it worked. And I struggle personally. Luckily, I'm not paid to have to come up with this answer, but I struggle personally to see what Golden State can do to both slow down Ja Morant and limit Memphis from actually putting points on the board. It feels like they are in a series against James Harden where it's like, we can't really stop him. We can only hope to contain him. The issue is that James Harden, if he doesn't get his, or if he doesn't get his in a perfect environment, Houston doesn't get theirs. That team wasn't built to create it off the dribble, to really do anything outside of what James Harden gave him. And that was even the case when Chris Paul was on the floor, and certainly the case when Russell Westbrook was on the floor. But even when Chris Paul was on the floor with them, it never worked. That secondary creator never showed up. Memphis might not have great creators, but they're a really sharp team. And I feel like they know exactly what to do when Ja goes into that hyper isolation sort of offense. They know how to run actions off of that. They actually have motion and plays and some semblance of good basketball off of the alpha in Ja Morant, who is playing like an alpha right now. And the Warriors can double team him, and I think they'll get burned that way. The Warriors can let him get whatever he wants, and I think they'll get burned that way. Again, he does not know what he's doing yet, and he's so athletic and is able to make such crazy shots. And if he's able to shoot a lick, and he has the first 2 games, it's a real problem for Golden State. And it might come down to, can they simply outscore? And that is a dangerous proposition for the Golden State Warriors, especially if the game is going to be slow and you're going to do a lot of half-court offense stuff, because the one guy who really needs to come through in those half-court offensive sets is Klay Thompson. And to this point, he is not. And by the way, as I said, they're doing a lot of offense to defense trading, and they're going to have to do even more of that now. If Damian Lee has to play 10 minutes a game, I don't really know how that jives with winning. So it's been fine. They have a worthy adversary, and my goodness, thank goodness they have a very highly paid coaching staff, because they have their work cut out for them from this point on. Think about the amount of adjustments this team has made in just a couple of days, right? Think about the adjustments they've made over the last 4 games they've played with lineups and rotations. And it's pretty wild stuff. So very, very curious. It's obviously exciting from a hoop head perspective to just see what happens next. Again, I think the Warriors win this, but my confidence was low going in, and it might be even a little bit lower right now. We're coming up on coin flip territory, folks. So fascinated to see how it all plays out.
Oh, hey, man. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. Great insight as always, Dieter. Go ahead and drop the social media handles where we can find all your great stuff.
It's at the San Jose Mercury News in the East Bay Times. You can catch me on KNBR most nights when the Warriors aren't playing. Right now, it's a little bit tricky with my other job and trying to get all that figured out. But I'll be doing Giants post game and stuff tonight, so it should be a pretty good time. And you can get me on Twitter at Dieter, Dieter.
There you have it. All right, guys, from Juju Talk Sports, Kyle Ledbetter and Dieter Kurtenbach. Stay safe, happy, and healthy. We'll see you on the next one.